Hello folks, it is I, David here again. I'm feeling much better, thank you very much for asking. And thank you all for joining me. 500, it has been achieved. So thank you so much to those of you who've subscribed onwards and upwards from this point forward. And it probably means that I'm going to have to do a bit more work, probably start putting out things like community posts to get a gauge on the kind of content that you folks want to see from me, and you know, that'll sort of steer where the videos go from there, I suppose. So what have I got planned for this evening when I get home? Well, even though I haven't been able to do a great deal of crafting, I have managed to get an awful lot of planning done. The first thing that I have done is decided on the weaponry that is going to be getting used for the blood-packed flyer, and I've also worked out how I'm going to mount that on, so I can get those pieces essentially cut out, glued to the underside, and get that one off and undercoated. With regard to the Zoiken armour, I've actually done a check back, and it's a ochre colour that they use for their livery, not green. Green apparently was blood packed in the earlier books. I knew I'd read green somewhere. So it's going to be an ochre colour. I am going to have a little bit of a check to see what I have that is sort of ochre-ish in terms of paints, because I don't want them looking too much like the Narmenians. I do want a point of difference between them. So that painting is currently on hold just at the moment, but not for long. The other thing that I've also done is have a good fossick about, and in some of the bits that are going to be left over from putting the weaponry onto that blood-packed flyer, I've also found not only ammo belts, but what appears to be a good thing for body for the flechette guns for the Loxatl mercenaries. So I will use one of those to prototype, and I will use the other one to create a mold, because I'm going to need more of them and I don't have enough. We may even get a chance of doing a prototype of the Loxatl mercenaries tonight as well. That's going to be interesting, because the miniature itself is very sort of squishy rubbery, so it's going to be interesting to see how that copes with things. And then I guess we shall just realistically have to see if there is anything else. I think that's 2 bits of building is probably going to be enough to be going on with this evening. Anyway, I'll see you guys in a few seconds. The problem now is I've got to remember what it was I said about 8 hours ago, because I'm getting old and senile. It probably had something to do with putting armament on this thing. So this is the blood-packed flyer, and lovely shape that it is, really happy with it, but there are no obvious guns, and we need lots of DACA for 40k. Now, I have decided to go along the route of raiding the Army Man box yet again, and it is these that I am going to be using for essentially the main guns, whether or not they're auto cannons or las cannons, not sure, but that will essentially get chopped off there, and they'll get mounted underneath, kind of just like that. Now, to help in mounting them, and here's one I prepared earlier, these little things are the clips for the tank kits that I got. Because these kits tend to come in separate pieces, they have inserts, and to give them sort of like more structural integrity, you kind of put one of these into a hole between the 2 bits, press them together, and that makes a good sort of mechanical joint. And you can even see where it's sort of like a little bit sort of hooked in there, so it clamps on. And then of course you glue the rest of it, and it's all good. Now normally you get exactly the right amount, but for some reason in the kits that I got an absolute shed load extra. So what I am going to do is basically cut it straight along the center like that into 2 halves, and then that means I'll have a nice flat piece to be able to attach it to the underside of the aircraft. And I'll do that sort of, you know, probably in 2 places, a bit like that. So if you imagine that's been sliced off just there, and then that is going to give me a nice sort of right angle bracket on which to undermount the guns. Not 100% certain how I'm going to do it, but that is the plan. That is what I'm going to be using some of these for, and it also means that they're round about the right size for mounting pylons for the missiles. I won't do it at the front. I'll obviously be doing it sort of further back here. Okay. But they will be able to get mounted as well. So that is going to be the weaponry that is going on the underside of this beast. Lots of construction work. Now, I am not using the whole of the weapon. Actually, I've just realized that those are two slightly different models. Okay, right. So, have I got another one the same? Yeah, that's the same. Right. Chances are these are the ones that I'm going to be using. I'm probably going to cut it off around about there. The front part will be mounted on. Obviously, that site is surplus to requirement. I'll shave it down and sort of pretty it all up. But that part is where it will finish. And then I'll just have cabling going from the back and up into the fuselage to sort of activate it, you know, the control system, that kind of thing. So that does mean that these back parts, or these back sections, are going to be excess. And this particular part here is what I had imagined as being a really good bit to use for the flechette cannon for the Loxatl. Now, as you can see, I've realistically only got the two, and basically all I've got to do is cut that section out, square it off, pop a barrel on front, and that is going to be the blaster itself. Now, the bandoliers, you've seen me use these before, and the last time I used them, I was hitting them with a hammer to make rivets for the Orc tanks and the Orc Stomper. But they make not too bad flechette shells. All I have to do is probably do a wee bit of scoring or cutting, just so it's a bit more flexible. Yeah, because you see how easily it snaps there, so that I can bend it around the body. I may even need to use heat or warm water or something like that just to get it to go around. But essentially, if that is the Loxatl like that, and that's the tail, that's the body, that's the head, the gun goes on the underside of it like that, and it's got the bandolier going essentially straight across its back like that. So that is what I am going to be using for the Loxatl. I'd better get some building done. And there is one set of weapon refits done to that Bloodpact flyer. I am not unhappy with that. See if I can... What do you reckon? Profile. Yep, that's good. Right, now it is Loxatl time. And this section here is the one that I want to reclaim from this. In fact, I'll just go snips for this. I'll see if I can keep that knobby bit on the front, because that will be an ideal anchor point for the gun barrel. Right, I'll shave that down, I'll clean this up, and then we'll go get a Loxatl and do something about the ammo bandoliers. Oh yes, I think what I'm going to have to do is just give them a slight score, just to kind of break up those ridges and make it a wee bit easier to bend. And then I'll try either a heat gun or hot water and just try and bend it round in a circle. Obviously I've got to get one of the miniatures to see exactly how small I've got to make the circle, and hopefully I've got enough ammo belts there to be able to do it. If not, if that doesn't work and it keeps just sort of like snapping, then the backup plan is going to be, unfortunately, get something like a strip of paper, snip ones off individually, glue it to the paper as if it's an ammo belt, and then maybe put another strip of paper over the top to sort of like join it together. I'm not sure, but that's the backup plan. I'll be able to do it. It just depends how much of a faff it's going to be. Right, I'll go grab some lizards. Hello everybody, I'm a Loxatl mercenary. Yeah, okay. I didn't do the assembly of this on camera because, one, the heat gun that I used to sort of shape the ammunition, that and cell phones and cameras, if you point it in the wrong direction, is just not a good thing. There is obviously the reclaimed part of the machine gun, and I've added. And of course, this was the point where the battery ran out on the cordless mic and you can't hear anything, which is why you're getting a voiceover. But I had been talking about the fact that I'd added the gun barrel and drilled it. Now comes the logistical problem of getting such a long miniature to fit on the right size base. And the one saving grace about it is the fact that it's such a squishy miniature that I can sort of bend it around. Because it is such a long miniature, I do have the option of sort of shortening that body essentially by cutting it roundabout in the middle, and then I can sort of hide the join under that ammo bandolier. The other thing with it being so flexible and the fact that Loxatl are really good climbers, I have also got the option of adding sort of quite bumpy or almost vertical terrain onto it, and then I can sort of like squish it up and over things. So I've got a bit of vertical room to be able to move it about or get it to fit onto the base properly. I don't want to be going for larger bases. That is around about the right size for an Ogryn, which is essentially what these are going to be taking the place of. And the one good thing about it being such a flexible miniature is the fact that there's an awful lot of wiggle room for me to be able to just sort of bend legs back or position them in sort of odd ways, which is not necessarily how it's lying, but glue will hold it in place. And then it is on to actually fixing it to the miniature. I've got the super glue ready, and if it ever comes into shot, that's baking soda. So I've essentially got the ability to sort of like glue it, and it will set very quickly. And it doesn't matter about sort of like the grittiness of the baking soda, because there's going to be other ground terrain there as well. Starting off, just to anchor the miniature, I'm gluing along the base of the flechette gun and just popping that into place. Then a bit of a squirt with baking soda. And now that that's anchored, I've got the ability to, move those legs back, pop it into position, bit of baking soda, there you go, that's it positioned. Obviously rinse and repeat for the other two legs and that tail. Yeah, so I had to glue this in a couple of places, essentially just to get it to curl around sort of nicely and not overhang the base too much. Obviously I was getting a fair amount of overhang on the head, but nah, that's okay. I mean, any bayoneted rifle or anything like that always overhangs the front of a miniature. Give it a wee bit extra on the tail there because there was obviously quite a bit of flex around, and because it was sort of trying to move by itself, I also ended up gluing its tail to its back, which was fine because the material, that sort of rubbery stuff, actually glued to itself without any hassle whatsoever. And it just sort of like eased off the tension. And there you are, that's one mounted Loxatl mercenary. I think the thing that's going to set this thing apart is the colour scheme that I painted, because obviously the Loxatl are sort of chameleon-like, and depending on what I do in terms of sort of like the ground cover, then I've got to get it to blend in, but also I've got the opportunity of adding sort of a spot colour and bits of debris that are a slightly different colour than just sort of like normal grey dirt, and they should be blending in with that as well. So I think these are going to be quite fun to paint. So yeah, that was it. One prototype Loxatl and one weapon refit on the flyer. That was my night's work. Me and my propensity for technical difficulties. Not charging the microphone, of all things. Anyway, it doesn't seem like a huge amount, but that was actually quite a bit of work, especially the fiddling around with getting the Loxatl gun belt to size. That was a mission in itself. I'm seriously going to have to rethink how I do that, but it's one under the bag. It's not a full unit. I need at least 2 more before it's a viable unit, and you can take Ogryns in units up to 10, which is why I've got 10 of the things. So that's all good, but I do need, before I do any more of them, I need to take a mould. Yes, I've got to do the mould video, and get some more of those flechette cannon bodies sorted out before I can do anything else, and work out a better way of doing the ammo belts. That is a problem for the future. Hey, it's one which is actually off the pile of shame and not sort of like a recent purchase. One thing that I will say with that model, when I do the actual ground cover on it, I'm going to be using the industrial rubble, the bit that's got, you know, odds and sods of pipes and bricks and that kind of thing, so that I can pick those out in different colours, and then that will allow me a little bit of leeway to add something different to sort of like its camouflage scheme, rather than it just being sort of like a mottled grey to tie in with sort of like the normal basing colours that I use. As for the flyer, really happy with that. But again, that sort of scratch building thing just does take time. So even though it's only been 2 units, I am not unhappy with that as a night's work. So there you have it. That ties it up for this one. I will get this edited, get it uploaded. As ever, if you enjoy this kind of thing, and hopefully you do, because the last one that I did, the Flat Earth one, I don't think people are realistically interested in it. So chances are it's going to be lots more crafting and wargaming, because that's what we're all about. Anyway, I will leave you good folks to your own devices, and I shall say toodle pip for now.